Hey, Twisted listeners, I'm Cindy.
And I'm Diva
This is Twisted Listers, a podcast about murder.
and Liz.
And this is part two of America's most prolific murderers. And I don't think we said
Hmm.
serial killers because it's not necessarily, right? I feel like there's mass
I
murderers
mean,
that are up there.
they all are,
Are
though.
they?
I mean,
All
the
right.
ones that we picked, anyway,
Yeah,
are.
yeah. But it wasn't
Yeah,
necessarily like,
that's a good point. I actually did specifically look up serial killers because mass shooters is a different list.
you're right. You're right. All
And
right.
when I looked up, I used the Wikipedia of serial killers by number of victims internationally, and I went down from like top to bottom.
Mm,
And
mm.
mass shooters is a different list because some of those guys have like 60 something, right? And like they weren't in there.
Right. Yeah, I mean, they didn't really put the work in, as it were, so I guess they don't make this list.
Serial killing implies you're killing random people, but kind of like one by one, or like kind of like
Yeah.
it's a slower process of killing a person, then another, that like day by day, rather like
Mhm.
it's not all at once. That's a
Right.
different list.
Right. Okay, fair enough. Now you guys see how we do what we
Yeah.
do. You see how the sausage is made.
Yes. Murder, true crime, nerddom.
Anyway, sorry, I keep sniffling. You just said you're a little under the weather, and I'm the one sniffling like a crazy person,
Yes.
so that's cool.
Yeah, I have a little bit of a voice thing. Thankfully, I'm not like suffering in agony or anything, but my voice sounds like shit. So hopefully it's not too distracting or anything.
Yeah,
I have tea. I have like six beverages. So
my headphones died, so I'm using like old iPhone ones, and you
mm,
sound insane to me, so like I really can't tell
okay,
what your voice is and
great.
isn't because it's just so distorted.
I think
Anyway,
it's okay.
guys, if you want to join us on Patreon, patreon.com/twisted listers. TikTok is just at twisted listers. I actually just posted a new TikTok today.
Oh, nice.
It was based on one of the ones that we did already, so I don't think anybody's watched it
Perfect.
though. It's like really like, they don't give you any love. Like they make it hard.
We
But
got to
anyway, there's a new one if you guys want to watch it.
check it out.
Yeah, if you guys would like to follow us on Instagram, you can do that at.
Twisted Listeners PCast.
If you'd like to send us an email with case suggestions or just to say hello, you can do that at.
TwistedListersPod@gmail.com.
And our website is.
TwistedListersPod.com.
All right. I went first last time, so it's you, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Oh, I'm excited.
Um, so as I told you, this is a weird serial killer because he's up on pretty high up on the list of number,
Hmm.
number of victims, but he didn't get like covered very much in the press. I don't think then or like since. And so a couple of the articles were like William Suff, the serial killer that the media forgot, like completely forgot about. And it might be one of those things where it's just so gruesome and the victims are maybe not people that, are maybe less cared about by the media. I don't know what it is, but
Hmm.
um, less covered, but should be more well known for sure.
Hmm.
So yeah, William or Bill Suff is our guy here, and all of this took place around the area of Riverside/Paris/Lake Elsinore
Oh,
between technically 1974 with a break, and then through 1992. So I will go through what that break is just in a second.
okay.
Yeah. So born on August 20th, 1950, making him a Leo.
Hmm.
Um, Bill Suff grew up in Lake Elsinore with four siblings. He reportedly struggled in high school. I couldn't find too much about his early years other than one brother being like, he was normal and fine. And you're like, okay.
Huh. Okay.
At whatever. At age 18, his dad abandoned the family and his parents divorced, and they experienced really hard financial times thereafter. So that's the only kind of like upsetting thing that I could find.
That's pretty fucked up.
But overall, not yeah, but overall, nothing like super serial killer, formation to me.
Okay.
But we don't have the whole story, so who knows?
Hmm.
He joined the Air Force after high school, serving in a pediatric ward of an Air Force hospital in Texas for a few years. I just want to put a pin in that it was like a children's ward. I find that interesting.
It's weird. I
Um,
didn't really even think about that being like a thing. You know what I mean? But I guess
yeah,
they have families, and so it makes sense.
yeah, yeah. I just find it interesting.
Yeah,
At
same.
at 19, at 19, he married a 16-year-old girl named Terrell
Oh,
after only knowing her for like a second.
okay. Cool, cool, cool.
And she, yeah, and she later described William as very jealous and abusive in their relationship, very domineering, all the usual shit.
Hmm.
1974, there he's living with Terrell in Fort Worth. He's working as a paramedic ambulance driver.
Hmm.
He only spent a few years in the Air Force, so now he's on to other shit.
Okay.
Um, they, I'm jumping right into shit because there's no fucking build up. They had two kids
Okay.
together. I'll try to do a build up. Um, and in 1974, they were both convicted of the murder of their 2 month old baby daughter, named whose name I'm gonna just try and pronounce. I think it's Dejanette.
Like Dijonais? I'm sorry. I'm sorry. That's a
It's
weird name.
Dijanet. So it looks like Dejanette.
Dijonate? I don't know.
Dejanette.
That's a weird name, and
It's a weird spelling. It's a weird name.
also what the fuck? Like, can we just, the
Yeah.
name aside, what the fuck?
Yes. So let's talk about what happened to Dejanette here. William was at home with the baby at the time and called Terrell and was like, "Whoops! I just like was walking in and just found the baby on the floor dead, just randomly. Nothing, nothing built up to this." But then, of course, the autopsy comes in and says, "Oh, fuck the fuck, you didn't," because it finds that this baby had not only died from blunt force trauma, but also had a lot of pre-existing injuries.
Oh
And
no. So they
this is
beat
really fucked up.
a baby.
So, trigger warning: this is really fucked up. Child abuse. She had 13 broken ribs, which I think is like most of your
That's like
ribs.
all of them, man. There's not that
All of
many.
them, yeah, yeah. Multiple different fractures, including a broken arm. She had tons of bruises, a bite mark on her,
Uh-uh.
and she had a cigarette burn on her foot.
That's fucked up.
It's really fucked up. And it's unknown if Terrell was complicit, involved, or just knew about it, or not involved at all. It's unknown. But this
Okay.
had taken place for some time. She had to have been aware the baby was injured, though, right?
Mm-hmm.
And to some degree, you'd think.
Okay.
William will testify that he never noticed any injury, which is fucking hilarious because he's also a paramedic.
Yeah, bro. Like,
Um,
just wow. Like, come on, dude. This is
okay.
literally your job. Get the fuck out of here.
Yeah. So ultimately, Terrell's conviction was overturned 2 years later in 1976 because they couldn't determine to what extent she was like involved or complicit or whatever. And she
Okay.
did seem very upset.
Okay.
William Suff got a 70-year prison sentence for murdering this baby, which
Is
he
that the
definitely
end of the
did.
story?
Sure isn't.
Sure isn't.
Because he also abused their other child. She ends up losing custody of him as well. And Terrell is like, fuck you, in
Mhm.
general. She writes him for a divorce. And apparently, Bill Suff here was really mad about this. Terrell trying to get a divorce from him, and wrote a bunch of mean letters to her, like being really heartbroken, including one, which I decided to include this quote because it's so stupid and random. And it's the only time I have like a quote from him.
Mhm.
He said, this is to Terrell, quote, "Divorce is the second worst word in the human language. The first is goodbye."
Oh God. This guy's
So he's
not.
like, first of all, you murdered a baby. Second of all, you're being very melodramatic about this woman wanting to divorce you
To
because you murdered her
divorce you. Also, you
baby.
just sound like a fucking dork. Like, the worst
Yes.
word is goodbye. It's like, I can think of way worse words. Like,
Yeah.
how about baby murder, you fuck?
Baby murder. Yeah. So in 1984, having only served 10 years out of that 70-year sentence, William was released on parole.
Why?
I don't know. He's a white guy. I don't know.
He's a white guy?
I got nothing.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
He got
I think you answered
a
it.
yeah. He got a job as a stock clerk, and he would go on to be a warehouse clerk for the county. And I just had to include this because it's wild. Because he would later make deliveries to the very cops investigating him. He would bring them their furniture and their shit from the county. So
Okay.
yeah, just saying.
I'm sorry. This is why does this guy exist outside of jail ever?
Look, it gets so much worse, dude.
Oh, fun. Okay.
So when he got out, he also apparently began harassing Terrell and leaving her threatening voicemails. Remember, he's still mad about getting divorced because he killed her baby.
Right, right. Which also the fact
So
that she like
mad.
divorced him and was like get fucked makes me feel like she probably wasn't involved and maybe was even like
Yeah.
a victim a little bit or a lot, you know?
Yeah. I'd like to give Terrell the benefit of the doubt. She did
Yeah.
say very harsh words against him pretty much
Yeah.
right away.
Okay. Yeah.
And maybe there was some abuse, but she didn't think it would escalate, you know?
Yeah, you can
But
also be
who knows?
complicit when you're like a victim, when you're being abused, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah,
He
it's
was
hard.
abusive to her. She was really young, you know?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So folks in the Riverside area where he lived as his, living his stock clerk life,
Mm-hmm.
had nothing but good things to say about him later. Apparently he was really into participating in the annual Riverside County Chili Cook-Off, which I
Okay.
think is a really fun detail for a gruesome serial killer to have about him. He loves
Yeah.
chili.
That's like what's his name with the people burgers?
Metheny. Yeah, Joe
Metheny, Joe
Metheny.
Metheny. That's what I was gonna say, but I was like, I'm wrong, but it was Joe Metheny.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think he also dabbled in chili as well.
I wouldn't be surprised.
I could see that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he also, okay. So Bill Suff also constantly seemed to be babysitting for his neighbors and friends, which I just think this guy puts himself around kids a lot, in my opinion. Volunteers. So the only odd things, though, that neighbors reported later was that he often went on like weird nighttime drives by himself, middle of the night, and he also carried a bunch of CHP cop paraphernalia and handcuffs in his car. So I guess some of the neighbors who liked him and ate his chili were kind of like, "Ooh,
Yeah.
okay."
Okay.
Love the chili, don't love the handcuffs.
Yeah, that's
So
fucking weird.
at some point, he gets married again to a teen girl. I didn't get her age, but I got
Nope.
teenager.
No thanks.
I don't know his age, but she is 21 years his junior. So I'm putting maybe her at like 15 and him at like 35, right? Around this time.
No, that's not okay.
Rough, approximately. Yeah. So he has a little bit of a child molesting vibes to me as well.
Yeah, just a hint of it.
Yeah. So Cheryl is aware, by the way, that he killed that baby, or at least was convicted of it. Who knows what he said? He could have said, "I'm innocent," blah, 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 blah.
I mean, if she's 15, it's not going to be hard to convince her that he was,
Yeah.
set up,
Yeah.
whatever he's against him, and
something like that. Who knows? Yeah.
Yeah.
So he definitely is abusive to young Cheryl as well.
Of course.
At some point, he has a long-term like mistress, and there's all this shit I won't even have time to get into. But he's definitely not great to the women in his life, which is fucking not surprising.
Right.
A former roommate, just as an example of the couples, described one time where Cheryl applied what he thought was too much makeup. So he got enraged and, blew up at her and said that she, quote unquote, looked like a prostitute.
Lovely.
So this is foreshadowing.
That's great on like so many levels.
Yeah. Also, like, fuck guys who feel the need to comment on how much makeup women wear. That's like a red flag that you're an incel, like school shooter.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You shouldn't care. So he and Cheryl had a baby daughter named Bridget Ann, who was very shortly and thankfully taken away from their custody because she was found to have severe injuries and brain damage from being severely beaten.
Holy fucking shit. So this guy just doesn't fucking learn. It's like, bro, you were supposed to be in prison like basically for your whole life. You got very lucky to get out and you're just a moron.
Beating a baby
piece
right away. Yeah. Marrying a teenager, beating a baby, same pattern.
Yeah.
And despite his previous conviction for like doing the same shit, neither of them get any charges.
What the fuck?
That.
Why?
They're white? I don't know. Dude, I don't know.
You like see the previous answer?
Yeah, it's my only guess. In 1986, or just cops not doing their job, that can happen. Or both. In 1986. All right. So right now I'm gonna list like I kind of regretted later like doing every murder in this case because there's a lot.
Yeah.
And as you'll notice, I get very detailed in some, and then towards the end I'm just like boom, boom, boom.
Yeah, that's kind of mine too.
Because I gave up. Okay. So 1986, the body of 26-year-old Michelle Gutierrez, thought to be Bill's first victim, is found in a Riverside drainage ditch.
Okay.
We're going in chronological order. A few weeks later, 25-year-old Charlotte Palmer was found having been possibly smothered to death.
Whoa.
Boop, 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 boop. About a year and a half later, in April 1988, 37-year-old Linda Ortega was found near the grounds of the rodeo in Lake Elsinore. She had been stabbed to death. And I think I say it in just a second, but almost all of these women are sex workers.
Okay.
And so it's kind of an unfortunate classic serial killer pattern, right? Where they're preying on these women because they are, not cared about.
Yeah.
By anyone. So, well, I shouldn't say by anyone, by cops.
Right. By society at large.
Right. But they definitely have people in their lives that care. They're just not being listened to.
Yeah.
Just a few days after Linda Ortega's murder, 27-year-old Martha Young was found strangled to death. And January 1989, Bill attacks 27-year-old Rhonda Jetmore, and this one is quite a fucking story. He picks up Rhonda as a sex worker, as he did for almost all of his victims. He started strangling her in the midst of their encounter, and she was able to hit him over the head with a flashlight that she had.
Nice.
She almost gets away, but he tackles her and they struggle back and forth. She's fighting back fucking viciously.
Yeah.
And weirdly in the fight, he says, "Fine, I'll let you go. Just help me find my glasses," which I don't know if that's a ruse or just him being stupid. But she goes along with it and helps him find the glasses. And then the second he's fumbling to put them on, she's like, "Bye." And she's runs as fast as she can.
Uh-huh. Did she get away?
She bails out of the house. She does. And luckily a car pulls up with some guy she knows, and they see this fucking big giant. Bill's a giant guy, by the way. He's a fucking beast of a man. Ed Kemper of a man, if you will.
Oh shit. Okay.
Maybe not quite that tall, but similar.
What a big man. Big boy.
Yeah, big guy. They see Bill chasing after her, and one of her friends actually pulls out a gun and fires at him and scares him. Doesn't get him, but scares him the fuck off.
Yeah, good enough. Dude, that's awesome.
So Rhonda is, to my knowledge, the only surviving victim. Or attempted victim. She waits to report this for a while because she said she was scared, but she does eventually report it in full. But of course, nothing comes of it. I don't think there's a huge investigation at this point. And over the next 2 years, he's going to kill at least 12, but I'm going to say closer to 20 plus women.
Wow.
So I haven't even started listing, and things are going to get gnarlier and gnarlier as well, because he got away with it already for these few years. So from between 89 and 92 or 91, he fucking pumps it up the scale and the insanity of each murder.
Yeah, he's really going for it.
Yeah. I'm drinking my tea and prepared.
Yeah,
this is a long list.
I'm ready.
1989 January, 37 Diana Talavera is found strangled. June, 28-year-old Kimberly Little is found on the side of a dirt road. She had been strangled to death and had cigarette burns all over her body.
Okay, there's a connection to the baby.
There's a connection. He likes to torture.
Mm-hmm.
Very much.
Yeah.
November 89, Julie Lynn Angel, who's 36, had been bludgeoned to death. He does a lot of bludgeoning and strangling.
But it's weird because he does mix it up, which is difficult. It makes it harder to pinpoint that this is all the same person.
He does, but as we'll see, there's definitely some signature moves that recur. December, we're still in 1989. December, 23-year-old Tina Leal is found on a rural hillside. She had ligature marks, so she had been bound, and she suffered extensive torture prior to death, which she had been stabbed to death. But before that, she had one of her nipples removed.
Oh, wait, so before she was dead?
Yes.
No, correct. Fuck, yep. Dude.
They're able to tell that. She had also been stabbed in her vagina.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. She had also been strangled and punched in the face. But again, she was stabbed to death, so those are just forms of torture.
Right.
And this is a sentence I don't love saying, but I have to include it because it shows you just how bananas this case is. In the case of Tina Leal, a quote-unquote 95-watt GE light bulb had been inserted into Leal's uterus and was recovered intact.
Holy fuck. I mean,
which, yeah.
Jesus Christ.
So there's a lot of torture, a lot of like him just being creative with torture happening.
Yeah.
Oh, it's fucked up.
Mm-hmm.
It's giving like Chicago Ripper a little bit sometimes. It's like very brutal.
Yeah.
And tortury. So around this time, there was a special task force formed to investigate these crimes. And I wanted to call that out because in this case, there seems to have been a real investigation. It wasn't like the cops were completely giving a shit. I think it took them too long.
Yeah,
But by the time
but
like we're in the middle of this, they start to like, oh shit, we should give a shit. Yeah.
Right.
And they do form a task force, which again, Bill is delivering office supplies to.
Right. So right there with them.
Yeah, hey officers, how's it going? Now we're in 1990. In January, 23-year-old Darla Ferguson was found strangled. She had also been bound and beaten and tortured prior to her death, her murder. In February, 35-year-old Carol Miller was found in an orchard, stabbed and smothered to death. And also the killer, Bill, had sat down and eaten a grapefruit next to her body.
Lovely. Okay.
Casual. November, 33-year-old Cheryl Coker was found in a dumpster. She had been strangled to death with a wire, and one of her breasts had been severed and just placed next to her.
Oof.
That did happen post-mortem.
Okay. I think it would be really hard to do that to somebody while they're alive.
The Chicago Rippers did.
I know.
For sure did.
They did. There were more than one of them too. That's part of it.
Yeah. And with the piano wire. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Things I can never forget.
Yeah.
But there are notes of Chicago Ripper crew here for sure.
For sure.
In December, 27-year-old Susan Sternfeld was found strangled. Now we're in 1991. We're still going. I didn't count these up, but I feel like it's more than 12.
Yeah.
January, 42-year-old Catherine Milna was found by a trash pile. She had been murdered by having a sock stuffed down her throat and literally just suffocating from the sock.
Wow. That is horrifying.
Yeah. Really fucked up. Way to go. In April, 24-year-old Sherry Pacer was found behind a bowling alley. She had been beaten, suffocated, and had a toilet plunger inserted into her.
Jesus fuck, dude.
So again, with the inserting of objects kind of being a thing. Mm-hmm. July, 37-year-old Sherry Latham was found strangled, and in August, 27-year-old Kelly Hammond was also found strangled. So he's on like a one a month like schedule.
Mm-hmm. He's taking a long drink. Keep going.
Long tea drink, yeah. September, we're still in fucking 1991. September, Catherine McDonald, who's 30, was found stabbed to death. This was his only Black victim, interestingly.
Oh, weird.
And she was also 4 months pregnant.
Oh man, wow.
It's fucked up.
Yeah.
She had been stabbed in her genital region as well, and also had a breast removed post-mortem. Yeah. Finishing out 1991, we have 35-year-old Delilah Zamora. In October, she was found strangled by a ligature and her throat had been crushed.
Whoa, dude.
So the throat bones were like pulverized.
Oh my God.
In December, 39-year-old Eleanor Casares was found stabbed and strangled, and a breast of hers was removed, and Bill took it with him.
Oh, okay. I was wondering when he was going to do that, because I feel like he's escalating, and that's like the next thing is like keeping that shit.
Yeah. Souvenirs. Yeah, for Bill here. So Bill was arrested actually in a routine traffic stop, because by this time there's a task force and there's also awareness of like looking out for the killer, right?
Yeah.
And police, I think this is a Ted Bundy thing, right? Police get him at a traffic stop, look in the fucking car, and just find like a wheelbarrow's worth of serial killer shit.
Right.
They're like,
right.
Oh, look at all this serial killer accessories you have, all of fake pretending to be a cop stuff, which I never read anything about in detail, but I think he was also doing like the I'm a fake cop thing.
Ugh, God.
Yeah. Yeah. And a bloody knife, literally a knife covered in blood was like sitting beside him like, oh, whoops.
Oh, come on.
You know?
Yeah.
Don't be speeding. Don't be running the red light, dude, when you have all this
don't
shit.
Be a fucking idiot about it. Like, I mean, it's fine. Get caught. You're the worst, but you know.
Yeah, so I didn't see the full list, but it's essentially like a serial killer kit. And although I just listed like I said, more murders. He was only charged for 12 because those are the ones that he had, like, they had the most solid evidence for.
Right.
And it's enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
At trial, some of the evidence that's presented include a fuck ton of fiber evidence, like a towel that was found on Kimberly Little's body had fibers that were found to match a sleeping bag from his van.
Okay.
He also had a murder van, just like the Chicago Ripper crew.
Nice. Yeah. Makes sense.
At the scene of the dumpster where Cheryl Coker was found, they also found a shoe print matching Suff. There was also pubic hair matches across different victims' bodies. And he also was a match to a semen sample found in one victim's body. There were sexual assaults, like, I think, scattered throughout, but for some reason I didn't kind of foreground that because of all the breast amputation.
Yeah.
Seemed to be more obviously there's a sexual motive.
Right.
Again, tons of shoe prints. One of the matching shoe prints also matched to one found on Sherry Pisser's back, like the small of her back.
Mm-hmm.
It was gross. And there was also unspecified, quote unquote, strong evidence that was collected from his house and van that was described as very strong and compelling, but all circumstantial. But I think the fibers and hairs and shoe prints aren't like that circumstantial. They're pretty solid.
Right.
And fucking this guy, like, murdered almost 2 babies. So,
yeah, I mean, he's certainly, it's not for like a trying, that he failed.
Yeah.
Fucking piece of shit.
So, despite all the evidence against him, Bill Suff always proclaimed his innocence. But in 1995, the trial concludes and he's found guilty of all 12 counts of murder. He was actually charged for 13. Sorry, but I forget. There was some boring logistics about why he couldn't get. He wasn't found guilty of the 13th murder, but it doesn't matter in the end.
Okay.
He gets the death penalty.
Oof. Okay.
And he tries to appeal this sentence, but those are soundly rejected.
Okay.
As of now, he still resides in San Quentin. He is 72 years old. In a death row with all of our
it's
roommates.
Yeah.
He's never going to be executed, but he is hanging out with Charles Ng, hanging out with all those assorted serial killers.
They're all chilling.
Yeah.
Living their worst life.
Living their worst life. Yeah. And like I said, even though there were only 12 convictions, he's suspected of well over 20, which is why he's kind of a higher on the list here.
Yeah.
And in 1997, he supposedly worked with an author named Brian Allen Lane to publish a book that included poems and short stories that he wrote. So he does seem like that kind of serial killer who's like a little theatrical, a little. I'm almost surprised that he didn't confess in a way, because he seems like the kind of guy like BTK who would be like pretty jazzy about it.
Right. I hate that.
He likes the attention, and he likes being like melodramatic. So
totally.
I don't know. I haven't found too much of that book, but like, don't give that shit attention. But
don't give him money. If you find it used somewhere in a bookstore, go ahead. Otherwise, absolutely not.
The story of Bill Suff, and he really looks like a serial killer. He really is really fucked up.
He's gnarly.
Oh, here's a book about him called The Chili King.
The Chili King?
The Chili King.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, that's an unfortunate name.
That is an unfortunate name. That's ridiculous.
Oh yeah. The book is called Cat and Mouse, Mind Games with a Serial Killer. So that's the one that's like official.
Yeah. Let's definitely not
quote unquote
get that.
That's not.
What a fucking turd.
Yeah, he sucks. He loves to beat babies and terrorize sex workers.
He loves to be sucky. Sucky piece of shit.
Yeah, he's a piece of shit.
Sounds like it. Jesus. All right. You could copy and paste your story and it would kind of be mine, but I'm still going to do it.
Yeah.
Mine is a much more well-known for whatever reason, because if you really look at these cases, they're very, very similar. So it's weird that one gets so much attention and one doesn't. I am doing Gary Ridgway, otherwise known as the Green River Killer. So
yes,
this guy is
an iconic piece of shit.
Iconic.
Yeah, ditto.
Yes.
Yeah.
Big time. All right. So August 15th, 1982, A man was out on the Green River in King County, Washington, so this is in the Pacific Northwest, when he stumbled upon a horrific sight. While in his boat, he saw what he thought was a mannequin floating in the water. This mannequin
They
was
always say that.
naked. They always do. And when he got
Always
closer to
do.
try to grab it, he fell into the water. As he fell
Ooh,
into the water, he realized that he was not with a mannequin, he was with a dead body. And when
that
he
is a horror
looked,
movie.
yes, what's even worse
Yeah.
is that he looked around and saw another body floating in
Oh
the
my
water.
god.
So now
I'm
he's,
picturing the poltergeist scene in the pool where they're like, ah.
yes, exactly. So he's in the water with these two nude dead bodies. He
Ugh.
pulls himself out as quick as he fucking can. And apparently he said he like sat there for a while and just like tried to collect himself. He then flagged down a man who was on a bike ride with his two sons, and this man went and called police. When police arrived, they were like, "You're full of shit. There's no way." But then
Yeah.
they saw the bodies, and it turned into an active crime scene. And while they were investigating the scene, they found a third body on the bank near the water. So there were three bodies within, feet of each other. Now, this body was less decomposed because, again, it wasn't in the water. This was a young girl, and she was also nude, and she had pants wrapped around her neck. So she was clearly strangled to death. These three bodies were later ID'd as 31-year-old Marcia Chapman, 17-year-old Cynthia Hines, and 16-year-old Opal Mills. Marcia, it was later
Okay.
found, had been in the water for over a week, while Cynthia and Opal had only been there for a few days, probably, even though Cynthia's body was more decomposed due to being in the water. Opal's looked like it had been there for a day or two at most, which we later
Okay.
find out was about accurate. These three
Okay.
bodies were found in the Green River on August 15th, like I said. 3 days before that, on August 12th, 23-year-old Deborah Bonner's nude body was also found in the Green River just a little ways away. She had also been strangled. Now, exactly, or almost exactly, a month before that, 16-year-old Wendy Lee Caulfield's body had also been found floating in the river. Her death was also strangulation, her cause of death, and also with her own clothing. Mike Tyson suddenly, just like Opal Mills.
Oh,
So we now have 5 victims in a very short period of time. And police in the Kent, Washington area form a task force to find out who the fuck is killing all of these young girls and women. Gary Leon Ridgway, I'm just going to jump in, was born
there we go.
February 18th, 1949 in Salt Lake City, Utah. He was the middle of,
Sagittarius.
yes,
Okay.
barely, but yes. He was the middle
Okay.
of
A lot of
3,
Pisces serial killers, though. Sorry, I had to say.
yeah.
There's a lot of
No.
Pisces. He's
He's
almost
one
there.
day after Rory's birthday. I was like, ooh, so close.
Okay.
Yeah. He was the middle of 3 boys. He had a pretty shitty upbringing. There's been worse, but it wasn't good by any means. His mother was
Hmm.
super domineering, constantly belittling his father in front of the children. He'd see his parents fight. Sometimes it was loud, sometimes it was violent. His
Yeah.
family moved to the SeaTac area in Washington. That's Seattle, Tacoma, the greater area. So it's
Hmm.
SeaTac, where he struggled in school, while his older brother Gregory was a star student and the favored and probably favorite child. His father was a truck driver, his mother was a sales clerk. Gary had a pretty low IQ, like low 80s, and was a bedwetter
Okay.
until the age of 13,
There's that red
which,
flag.
yep, as we all know, that's a big red flag. And on top of his mother being domineering and just generally awful, she would do this really fucked up thing whenever he would wet the bed. She would wash his genitals. So
Oh,
yeah, and she did this up until the time he was 13. So, like,
okay.
that's some, like,
That,
how to create a serial killer in 3 easy
yeah.
steps. Like,
Yeah, that is in the book,
it
The
is
Serial Killer Formation 101.
really fucking bad. He would
Yeah.
later say that he had mixed feelings of shame and arousal when she would do this, and that he would often fantasize about
Uh,
killing his mother when he was young. So that right
okay.
there, psychologists later would come out and be like, we think this was him killing his mother over and over and over. Another Big
Yeah.
Ed kind of tie-in, you know,
Very, yeah.
because Big Ed would say like, "Oh, I'm killing my mother over and over." I don't think Gary had like the intelligence or the understanding of himself enough to ever really put that together, but others did for him. Gary was also subjected to corporal punishment by both parents over little things, and as a result was a pretty violent youth. This will be quick, Diva, I promise. It's just one sentence.
Mm,
He took his violence
okay.
out on animals, But also, when he was in his mid-teens, he took a 6-year-old boy from the neighborhood out to the woods and stabbed him through the ribs with a folding knife, puncturing his liver. The
Ooh,
boy survived, and while I can't find a lot about what happened to Gary, I do know that he at least went to a psychologist for this. But this wasn't on his permanent record, which I find really interesting. So
wow.
when Gary graduated high school, he married his high school sweetheart and also went into the Navy, where he did see combat in Vietnam. He also went to a lot of women in the sex trade out there and even got gonorrhea
Okay.
at this time.
Okay.
Yeah. His marriage fell apart pretty quickly due to these infidelities, and he remarried pretty quickly. He didn't seem to have any trouble getting girlfriends or dates, which is like disgusting. And I was trying to look at a younger picture of him without knowing who he was, and I can sort of understand that like women wouldn't be like repulsed by him. He had like the
Right.
cool like 70s haircut and he was like kind of fit,
He just looks like
and
a guy. He
he
doesn't
just looks
look
like a guy.
particularly sinister.
No,
Yeah.
he doesn't look like a fucking serial killer or a crazy person. Like he just looks pretty
No.
normal. He doesn't look smart. I'll say that. Like he kind of has like dead
Mhm.
eyes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So during his second marriage, he was married to a woman named Marcia, and they became very super religious. Like Gary was like over the top religious,
Mm,
like would cry while reading the Bible and shit like that. But Gary continued to pay for sex during this whole time and had like an addiction. These two were married
okay.
from 1973 to 1981, finally divorcing due to his cheating. All three of his wives, because he does get married again, would say that he had an insatiable appetite for sex and would demand it from them multiple times a day, which is like, that's a lot. Like, how do you even have time for that? That's kind of crazy. So, Gary was a truck driver, and between the years of 1981 and 1988, he lived alone. He did have a son with Marcia, but I think the son mostly lived with her. So while Gary lived alone and didn't have trouble getting girlfriends, he also frequented Seattle's First Avenue and also the Pacific Highway South, also known as the SeaTac Strip, which were areas
Yeah.
known for human trafficking. So now we're back in 1982. Police have a task force trying to figure out what is happening to all of these girls. They're looking at every connection possible. They even went to serial killer Ted Bundy for help in 1984 after like
Mm-hmm.
striking out. Um, they also asked FBI profiler John E. Douglas for a profile, and both he and Bundy had some good insight into who the killer might be, or at least the type of person he was.
Yeah.
Bundy said that the killer was likely returning to the kill sites to have sex with the dead bodies, and that police should stake out any dump sites that they found. As we know, at least 3 of the bodies were found together, so this tracks. John Douglas said the Green River Killer was a confident yet impulsive middle aged man who would most likely
Mhm.
frequent the murder scenes in order to reenact the crimes in his mind. The killer was probably familiar with the area and was likely to have deep religious convictions, which is really interesting that he figured that out.
Ooh, yeah.
Mhm. Douglas also believed that he might have an active interest in police work, especially the investigation into the recent murders. The killer might even contact the police in an effort to assist in the ongoing investigation. So, pretty interesting insight here. And
Yeah.
police were inundated with tips from the community, which actually greatly hindered their investigation. And meanwhile, the bodies kept stacking up. In
Yeah.
September 1982, 17-year-old Giselle Lavorne's body was found, also nude, strangled, and near the river. Her blonde hair had also been dyed black, although apparently when she went
Mm,
missing, it was blonde. So,
okay.
kind of weird.
Interesting.
Yeah. Most, if not all, of these women and girls were working in or somehow associated with sex trafficking, and many of them knew each other. Opal, who was not involved in this, and Cynthia, who was, and whose bodies were found together, were friends and only went missing 1 day apart. And the
Oh my gosh.
area, yeah, the SeaTac area had 240 arrests in 1982 alone for sex work. So,
Wow.
yeah. So there weren't any more bodies found in 1982. So I think we had 7 in 1982, which is a ton. And the craziest part, it was all like August and September. But then things seemed
Mhm.
to calm down. Then in 1983, at least another 8 bodies that were attributed to the serial killer, now called the Green River Killer, were found. Police had set up numerous stings in the area, having found this connection with sex work and trafficking, and they'd stopped many men. They also were kind of taking what John E. Douglas said about the men wanting to be involved, and they kind of zeroed in on this taxi driver who was a little too overzealous in trying to be helpful with police. They
There it
decided,
is.
yeah, well, this isn't him though. He's not a taxi
Oh,
driver. He's a truck driver.
so close. Okay.
Yes, very close. So they decided that he was like the primary suspect, and they made his life a living hell for like 2 years. It ended up not panning out, which obviously, but was a
Yeah.
really big deal. And I think he maybe even like sued the police. They
Oh, yeah, I
also,
bet.
I mean, that's fucked up, right? To have your life like
For
that.
sure.
Yeah. They also, at a few points, pulled over Gary, who was found with more than one woman in his car. The first
Oh
thing that
my
made
God.
Gary a suspect, because he was a suspect. Now, he wasn't as big of a suspect as the taxi driver, but he was a suspect, was when one of the missing women's boyfriends, Reed, sex trafficker, her pimp, came forward with a
Mm.
description of the man he last saw her with before she disappeared. And that man ended up being Gary Ridgway. So he gave a description of Gary's truck, a description of Gary. He even wrote down his license plate number, and it led police right back to Gary's home. Police interviewed Gary, and while he admitted to using our services, he said, I dropped her off at the strip and went home. Like, anything could have happened to her. It's dangerous work. Police later searched his car and house, but were satisfied that he didn't kill her. So this did put him on their radar, but they didn't really have a lot of reason for thinking he would be the killer, besides that he was seen with her before she went missing.
Yeah.
Because 240 arrests in 1982, a lot of people are using sex workers at this point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So police, sorry, I missed where I was. Okay. So while they did find him to be a suspect due to his constant use of women in the sex trade, they never really had anything that would stick to him. And at one point in 1983, after he was interviewed by police and gave advice on how to catch the killer, they marked him as not a prime suspect. Even though this is what John E. Douglas said the killer would likely do.
Yeah, he's checking all the boxes.
Yeah, they didn't listen. Also, just so you guys know, for Bundy, like that thing that Bundy said happened to be right. He didn't do a lot else for this case, but during these interviews, he did admit to more murders that he committed, which is kind of interesting.
Oh,
Yeah.
he was like reminded of some old times. He's like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So finally in 1987, police took hair and saliva from Gary after they found him yet again with a woman in his car. But they didn't really have the advances in DNA at the time to do anything with it. So they just had like hair, they had saliva, and he went on living his life. In 1988, he married his third and final wife, Judith. They had been dating since 1985, and then they became serious got married in 1988. After he was caught, Gary said that he slowed his killing way down after marrying Judith because he, quote, truly loved her, and his happiness made him less murderous. I have
Less
thoughts on
murdery.
that.
Not murdery.
Not
Just
not
a
murder,
little less.
but less.
Yeah.
We'll get to my thoughts
Okay.
in a minute. But anyway, let's
Okay.
get back to 1984. So we had 7 bodies in 1982, 8 or 9 in 1983, 13 in 1984. So
Okay, so did he slow it down
no,
or
well, he hadn't met her
okay.
yet. He hadn't met her yet. They hadn't even met till
Oh, okay.
1985. So this was like his banner
Gotcha.
year. This
Okay.
killer, he was killing more and doing a better job at getting away with it. He would often pose the women and would leave items from other people around the scene, like cigarette butts, gum, or papers like mail with other people's names on them. So for a man who wasn't very smart, this was something he was pretty good at. He also would
Okay.
pose the victims in horrible positions. One of them was found with like a bag on her head. 2 of the women found in 1982 had like triangular shaped pebbles stuffed inside of their vaginas. So he was doing some
Oh.
really weird shit.
Yeah, also getting weird with it, getting creative with it.
Yeah. So Gary kept coming up in descriptions by witnesses, so he was obviously now kind of officially a suspect, but also the murders did sort of stop after 1987, with only 3 more being tied to this killer between 1988 and 2001. So it was hard to keep collecting evidence or catch him in the act. I mean, he really basically stopped. And there were more incidents during this time to make things more complicated. For instance, there was another man in a dark truck who abducted and raped 2 women by gunpoint, but later released them. The craziest thing about this was one of the victims later disappeared and was in fact a victim of the Green River Killer. So first she was raped and abducted by one man. She continued, working in the sex trade. Unfortunately, she probably didn't have a choice. She was also 15, so she's a little girl, and then was killed
Oh
by
my
Gary
God.
Ridgway later. So by the time she was 15,
Disgusting.
all of this happened to her, and then she was murdered. The man who,
Disgusting.
yeah, the man who took these two women, or girls, essentially little girls, was caught and charged. And police at first were like, "Oh, we caught the Green River Killer," and then they realized that the MO is different. Like the Green River Killer was not letting people go, at least as far as they knew. So anyway, after years of suspecting good old Gary here, thanks to the advances in DNA, police were finally able to use semen found on 4 of the bodies to definitively tie Gary to the murders. And they used his saliva and hair samples that they took in 1987. So they
Okay.
really thought it was him, but there was nothing they could do about it at the time. Once he was
Okay.
caught, however, Gary sang like a canary. Good old Gary
Yeah.
the Canary. He actually struck a plea deal that allowed him to avoid the death penalty. So he absolutely, would have been a candidate for this because he killed so many
Yeah.
women and so many minors. Like almost half of his victims were like 19 or younger. Like it was fucking
Ugh,
crazy.
God. And so
Crazy.
sad that those little girls were
Yeah.
entangled in that shit too. Like
Yeah.
it's just really sad.
And just so you guys know, I did a lot of reading about the individual victims, but just like I can't do all of this in
There's just
a
not
20,
time.
30
Yeah.
minute, but it's really important, I think, if you guys want to go listen to bigger, podcasts about Gary Ridgway. There's a lot of insight into like the girls
Yeah.
and who they were, and it's really fucked up. And a lot of their families, you know,
Yeah.
were still involved in their lives, and it was really sad. I think
Yeah.
a lot of the time when people think about women who are in the sex trade, they kind of isolate them as like singular beings, no family, no
Yeah.
friends, but they often have
Sure.
like a rich life and families and
Yeah.
people who love
They
them.
often have
And
kids
yeah, a lot of
too.
the time they
Yeah.
do. And some of these women did.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And it's also like, I think also must be hard for them to be a victim, or for anyone to have a loved one be a victim of a serial killer, but especially in this case, because you feel like they're just like a number that gets lost in the shuffle. There's no like profiling of your loved one ever,
ever. Yeah, and
except
I
for like
feel
in a really
bad.
extended
Like I'm
take.
kind
No,
of
you can't.
I am doing that, but like there's 48 victims like that are
Yeah.
named and definitively like he killed them. That's that we know of for sure. And even with, serial killers with really high body counts, it is very, very rare that they actually have that many named definite victims. So this is
Yeah.
really unique and it's a lot to cover. So part of the plea deal involved Gary admitting to and giving up the locations of as many of his victims as he could remember, but that didn't go over super well because he killed so many women, he'd lost count. Couldn't remember their names, didn't even know half of their names, and also a lot of them use fake names. He didn't know the
Yeah.
locations in all instances. So
So
all
there's
of the
definitely
bodies,
probably more.
tons. So all of the
Yeah.
bodies that were found, he admitted to. But there's so many that were not found. I mean, the real body count for him is closer to 100 people by his estimation and by police, but we know of 48. So the details of what he did were really fucking fucked up. He said he'd pick up the girls and women, have sex with them either in his truck or more often at his house, and occasionally just outside somewhere. While having sex, he would get behind them, then start strangling them, often with a piece of their own clothing. So you'd use
Ugh.
pants, socks, whatever was available. And a lot of the women were
Yeah.
found with these articles still tied around their necks. So he would like
Yeah.
garrote them with their own clothing. He would then stash their bodies near or in the river and would often come back to the bodies to have sex with them, just like Ted Bundy said he would. He also admitted to using his young son to lure the women, and he even
Mhm.
said so he would like use his son's like picture to like make the women trust him, like, oh, he's a family man. And in one instance, he had his son in the car with him when he murdered a woman. He picked the woman up with his son in the back seat, and then he pulled over and told the woman, like, we're going to have sex in the woods. My son's just going to be asleep in the car. He took her out to the woods, murdered her, and then came back and told his son that she decided to walk home.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Like, who murders
That's like the
somebody?
one story.
Yeah.
Yeah, that story obviously sticks out, I think, in with Gary Ridgway, like so prominently. Like that's so fucked up.
I
Does the
feel
son remember that?
terrible. He said he doesn't remember it. He
Okay.
doesn't, but he
Okay.
probably blocked that shit out, dude. Also,
Yeah,
like, how
yeah,
many
it's good
individual nights do you remember from that age? Like when you're really
for
young.
sure.
But for the
But
woman,
either
it's
way, good.
horrifying. Like,
I mean, good for the
yeah,
son to not remember. I mean, yeah,
yeah. I mean, fuck him for doing that to his son.
yeah, yeah.
It's fucking crazy. As for why he was raping the corpses, Gary said it was so he didn't have to get a new live woman every night, which reduced his chances of getting caught. But I think that's
Well,
bullshit because first, you don't do necrophilia as a matter of practicality. Like you do it because you
no.
like it. Like, come on. He's not,
Yes. Yes.
you know,
It's not like, well, I just had to. No,
no,
it's not a
no.
practical thing. And he easily could have killed someone else. Obviously, he's doing this so frequently.
He's doing like one a month minimum. And he
Yeah,
also
yeah.
later admitted that he did just have sex with like 40 or 50 other women and didn't kill them just in case he got caught. So he'd have those women to be like, oh, yeah, no, he didn't hurt me. Like, look at how many of us didn't die. Like, he was trying to like play the odds in a way. So it's like, dude,
Yeah.
if you just want to go have sex with a woman and you don't want to kill her, you can do that. You don't have to perform necrophilia. So I
Yeah.
think that's bullshit.
And it's so fascinating that Ted Bundy like knew
New.
that in his profile as someone who also did that was like,
Yeah.
I know him when I see him.
Yeah.
He's just like me.
They can smell their own essentially. It's so fucked up.
Yeah. And
He
Ted Bundy
also
loved that shit
oh,
too,
he
being asked
loved
about
it.
that.
But he also
Loved it.
wouldn't give excuses like this. He wasn't like, "Oh, it was a practical reason." It's like, no, he's like, "I just fucking wanted to." Like, I loved it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like he was just a
Yeah.
psycho. So was Gary, but Gary had weird like reasons for it. He did, like I
Yeah.
said, he said that he killed less women after marrying his last wife because she made him so happy. But I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that that is also bullshit. And that the reason
Mm,
that he couldn't do that is because he couldn't just be out all night raping and murdering women. Like you can't go rape and murder women when you have a
yeah.
wife at home all hours of
Yeah.
the
I was
night.
gonna say it's just logistical. He just doesn't want to get questions. He doesn't want her looking.
Yeah. And especially like if he
Yeah.
murdered most of these women at his house, you're not going to do
Hmm.
that when your wife is home. It's not going to be as easy
It's
to
just
like rape and murder
practical.
a woman in the
Yeah.
living room.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and he did still kill like 3 people, and it was a very, very less. So it could have been a mix of things. But again, I think that's also I think that's actually a matter of practicality and not because he was like in love.
Right. Right.
Anyway, so Gary was arrested November 30th, 2001, and his trial began in 2003 with him finally being charged with 48 murders, though police, like I said, think it's closer to like 100 victims. There are 6 more named victims attributed to Gary that they were not able to charge him with due to lack of evidence. And again, he can't remember. So I don't know if he did it or not. He probably did. It's not necessarily that he's not cooperating. It's that, you know, he can't fucking remember because there's so goddamn many of them, which is
Yeah.
crazy. So he's 74 years old currently. He's still in prison. He was not given the death penalty, but let's just hope he dies soon because he is a complete fucking waste of space. And again, I
Wow.
realize there's a lot more. We actually recorded late because I couldn't wrap my mind around how to like present this case.
No, you did a great job
It's
at, I
yeah,
think, at condensing it down. That was
okay.
good.
I'm
And yeah, like
glad.
you said, you can't do each and every victim, but I think it was a good Cliff Notes for
Okay.
sure.
Yeah. I really think they're the
Yeah.
ones that should be focused on, but it would be like a 5-parter for that. So yeah.
Yeah. And I'm sure someone's done that. It's okay. Someone's
Oh,
already
there's
covered
so
that
many. Yeah, yeah.
base.
There's
Yeah.
a lot. Yeah. Anyway.
And talk to the families. That's the kind of thing you can do if you have a podcast that is literally just about that, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. But then your podcast is over and you're sad. I mean, we could do seasons, I guess. But
Yeah.
anyway, so that's Gary Ridgway. And this is a fucked up
Wow.
ass set of people. This is
Piece of shit. I hate his face too. Can I just say that I hate his
his
face?
little
It's like
rat
a
face.
really, yeah, it's a hateable face. Even
It
if I
is.
didn't know he was a serial killer, but obviously more so knowing what he did, you just look at him and you're like, oh, it's like he's so gross.
Yeah. No, he's the worst. He's the
It's the
worst.
absolute
And
worst.
that's why I didn't want to be like, oh, he was good looking, because I don't think he was. I can just understand why. Like, he wasn't like hideously repulsive and he seemed like a normal
Right.
guy. He's a truck driver. He's like a blue collar dude.
Yeah.
It makes sense in Washington that he would be able to find women. So,
Who's a serial killer who is like hideously repulsive?
like,
Trying to think.
Otis Toole. What's the other dude?
Oh yeah.
What's his
Yeah.
name?
Henry
Henry
Lee
Lee
Lucas.
Lucas.
Yeah.
Hideous
Okay, yeah.
monster.
Yeah, yeah, that's
Um,
true.
there's more. Who else?
That's pretty
Uh,
obvious.
Samuel Little was like kind of normal looking, I guess.
normal looking. Yeah, for a while, Richard Ramirez looked pretty serial killer-ish with the bad breath and the sharpened like teeth, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if he was like a regular dude who didn't murder people, I could understand women like being attracted to him. But like when your
Yeah.
mouth smells like an asshole, like I don't understand why
Mm.
anybody is like into that. Like, rotting teeth. Anyway, whatever. That's it. Let's talk about next
Okay,
week.
let's do it. Oh yeah, it's your sorry, mail just got delivered so loudly.
Mhm.
You just got it's your pick.
It's my pick, and I'm choosing self-defense
Yes.
murders. So this is
Yes.
people who murdered in self-defense. It was kind of taken from the 4th of July murder I did with Stacy Lannert, how she killed
Yeah.
her
Yeah.
father because he fucking deserved it. And that made me want to explore that kind of more and maybe like both sides of it, not just people who were actually murdering in self-defense, but those who kind of said they were and maybe
Yes.
weren't. So it's going to kind of
Yeah. And there's a whole
span.
spectrum of like, oh man, fuck that person, kill them, to like, oh wow, that's you were not doing that in self-defense at all.
Right, right. I'm excited
So
to kind of look through those and kind of
yeah.
compare and contrast, if you will. It's like a survey
Yeah.
course. So,
Self-defense? Question mark?
question mark?
Murders?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Self-defense? Self-defense. Like, I don't know. Maybe. All
Yeah.
right. So that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed these. Go America. Oh, also, please leave us nice reviews on Spotify. Like give us 5
Yeah.
stars. We got a bad review from somebody because we're talking shit on America, and people who
That's
love
awesome.
America are extremely fragile. They love to call everybody else fragile, but they are extremely fragile.
Yeah.
So if you guys want to go on there, if you haven't, it'll take like 3 seconds. If you listen to us on Spotify, just give us a nice little rating. We'd love it if it were 5 stars. Um, you know, rate with your heart, but just keep in mind that people like that are out there just giving us bad ratings for shit that has nothing to do with our actual podcast because they're dickheads. So please feel free to do that. Thanks again, everybody, for listening. We love you. Tune in next week for self-defense murders, whatever the hell that means. And until then,
Day.
off our
Live.
loose.
Yeah.